friends, how do you feel about mushroom soup? We love it, and today I'm going to make not just any mushroom soup recipe. I'm going to make Longwood Gardens mushroom soup. So minus the truffle oil. I don't have any truffle oil, and I'm okay with that. The other thing to know about this is that I've tweaked it a little bit, but that's not a surprise to anybody. So you need 1 tablespoon of oil and 1 tablespoon of butter. And then let's talk about leeks. Have you used leeks before? Do you like leeks? I think that wasn't quite half. I think there was 2 in there. Okay. Do you like leeks? I love leeks, and I especially love leeks in a quiche. But today I'm making it. So what I love to do is because leeks have dirt in them, and that's the kind of the hard part of cooking leeks. So I cut the white part at the bottom, cut off the end, cut off all the green at the top, and then I slice them in half, and then I chop them into the small pieces I want. And then I put them in a bowl and I break them up, and then all I do is I take what's on the top of the water, because all of the grit, all of the dirt is actually going to go to the bottom of the water dish. And so as long as you kind of cut them open and you move them around in your hands, all the dirt should be on the bottom and your leek should be perfectly clean. And that, my friend, is your leek tip. So we've got leeks, and I'll take that water out to water the plants. So I've got 1 leek, I've got some tarragon, 4 sprigs of tarragon, and I've got some thyme. And I'm just gonna keep those all together like that, and in they go. And we're just gonna let all that flavor kind of cook together. The other thing I'm gonna put in here is I'm gonna put 2 banana shallots that I cut up. This is a banana shallot. This is a regular shallot. If you couldn't find banana shallots, you might do, and I have 2 big ones that I'm using on my onion plate. If you couldn't find a banana shallot, just double your regular shallots and use 4, or you could use a small red onion. Any of those will give you the shalloty kind of yumminess that you're looking for, and you're just gonna put those guys in there. If you wanna break them up so they cook a little faster, you can do that, but we're just gonna let these guys saute and let this be the base of our mushroom soup. So we're gonna just let those guys warm up together, get going. It's actually, I've been planning this recipe for a while, and I had planned on doing it on a really warm day, or on a really cold day, but it turns out New Jersey thinks it's kind of late spring, minus all the beautiful trees, and so it's 70 if it's not 75 today. It's really, really wild, but that's okay. It's a good day, and I'm gonna let the leeks and the shallots kind of cook down. I've got a tablespoon of butter, a tablespoon of oil, and off we cook, right? Okay, let's just let that cook on and get it saute on. Okay, can you hear them? So there we go. 2 banana shallots, 4 sprigs of thyme, fresh thyme, and 4 sprigs of tarragon, and 1 big leek. I'm gonna set these off to the side. I've dumped out, I'm using the same container that I did the water in to clean the leeks. I've put that out into my baskets on the porch. And now I'm just taking these vegetables off because they're soft and they're yummy, and oh my gosh, it smells so good in here. But it's time for the mushrooms. You know, Dixon's, we're a mushroom forward house. So with kind of still the residue of the butter and the oil in there, I have 16 ounces of mushrooms. And Julia Childs always says, don't crowd the pan. But the reality is I don't want the mushrooms to brown. I just want them to saute. So I'm gonna salt them, and that's gonna help them release some of their water. And I'm gonna put a little pepper in as well. I did not salt and pepper the leeks because I'm expecting this to have enough salt for that. And you can always salt more. You cannot take you can't take salt out. So I've got button bella mushrooms in here. I've got 8, maybe 12 ounces of that, and I have 8 ounces of shiitake, and probably 4 ounces of shiitake and 4 ounces of oyster mushrooms, and then the 16 of bellas. And so I've got a lot of mushrooms. And these babies I've got on a medium heat, and they need to saute down. So it's all about building layers in terms of this. I want this to be a vegetarian dish. I might grill chicken and add it later if I want, but I want this to be a vegetarian dish, so I'm not using chicken stock. I don't have any vegetable stock, so I'm just going to use water, and I'm going to be smart about the layers that I'm building. That's my plan today. So mushrooms, cooking on down. Okay, so now the instructions, or the Longwood recipe, says wilt the mushrooms. They're wilted. So they look good. They went from being a full pan to being a half pan, and they go in the vegetable container. We just scrape out the bottom of this, and we get ready for, actually, no. I made a mistake. What? I've got to go backwards. Stop the presses. That's okay. That's okay. Let's dump the mushrooms back in. No trouble. Here's the thing. Most of my cooking is from recipes I know really well. And this is not a recipe I know very well. And I don't always follow recipes very well. So that's okay. So what it asks for, oh my gosh, now these onions have the mushroom juice in them. I'm going to put a half a cup of sherry. Now I don't know if you have cooking sherry. You can get it at any grocery store. It's not, I don't think it's alcoholic. Alcohol by volume is 17%, which means that it is really nothing. So, and it'll burn off anyway. So what we're gonna do is I just bought it at the grocery store. If you don't have that, you could put a little splash of red wine in. You could put in Marsala wine if you have that for cooking, if you make chicken Marsala, or you could just leave it out. These are your options, but I'm using a half a cup, and now I'm gonna let that cook down by half. And really, there's not a whole lot in here, so I don't think that's gonna take that very long. Then I'm gonna take the mushrooms out so you can see it's just barely in there. But it smells lovely, oh my gosh, right? Because it's got the tarragon, it's got the thyme, the mushrooms, the leeks, the shallots, yummy. So all this, I'm gonna let this reduce by half. Probably is gonna take about 5 or 10 minutes. I'm gonna dump it out, and I'm gonna make a roux. That's our next step. There's a lot of process to this. You know, usually my recipes and meals are pretty fast and pretty, this is not one of those. This is a building recipe, but you're not gonna be sorry, I promise. Should we taste a mushroom? No, not yet. Be right back. Okay, I've got the mushrooms set off to the side. I've emptied the pot. I'm gonna put a tablespoon of butter into the hot pot, basically I'm making a roux now. This is gonna be part of what makes it kind of thicken up. So that's the end of that butter. That's okay. And so I've got a tablespoon of butter that I'm melting. And then I've got a tablespoon and a half, which in my head in general, a roux is equal parts, but not in this recipe. So I've got 1 tablespoon of butter. So altogether this is a 2 tablespoons of butter recipe and a half a cup of cream, which I don't think is too much for the amount of just richness that comes to this. When we go to Longwood over the years, we've been going to Longwood since we were first dating. We went, our first Longwood date was January in 2010, and we went to Longwood and it was 40 degrees, and 40 degrees doesn't sound warm, but in the sunshine it was really warm. So we always say Longwood 40. So I've got a golden kind of yellow roux going. And like I said, I want this to be a vegetarian because we try to have a couple vegetarian meals a week. So this is one of them. And I don't have any chicken stock. I don't have any vegetable stock. And so the recipe doesn't call for vegetable stock. I very often would use vegetable stock, or I would use chicken stock to kind of deepen the flavors. But that's not what they call for. So I am doing it straight to their recipe. And it's 4 cups of water, and I'm just gonna slowly put it in. So at first I get kind of a gravy, which will help it not be bumpy or gravy or lumpy, right? I wanna smoothly get the water into don't rush this part because you'll get lumps. And honestly, you're gonna have mushrooms. If you don't puree this, you're gonna have mushrooms and you're gonna have leeks and you're gonna have onions. And so a couple lumps don't matter, right? We're just cooking at home anyway, but try to make it smooth. So take your time with this part. It really doesn't have to be, yeah, where do we gotta go, right? So I think that's good. So I'm slowly bringing in the 4 cups, and that's good. So 4 cups, whisking this in. Then I'm gonna add the cream, then I'm gonna add the vegetables back in. Now, when we would first go to Longwood, we would get our own, I don't know, I think initially first when we were first dating, we didn't share food, right? Because we don't wanna share food. But when we were, Longwood food is not cheap. And so we had a membership, Peyton had a membership, and initially he would take me as guests, and then later on in our relationship, we switched the membership to both of our names, and so I wasn't a guest anymore, I was just a part of the membership. And it was a free date, so that was great. But then we would split the soup. We would get a large soup and then something else and split it. And we always called that the Marshall plan because, well, my maiden name was Marshall. You probably knew me as Charles Marshall maybe. And Peyton's middle name is Marshall. And so we called it the Marshall plan when we split food. We still call it that. Okay, so this is all smooth and just whisking in the rest of the water, 4 cups of water. So that's okay, making sure that's completely combined, right? Okay, now I'm gonna whisk in 1/2 cup of cream. Now you can do heavy cream, you can do half and half, you can do whole milk, your body, your choice. Your body, your choice. If you wanted to use an alternative milk, a plant-based milk, and you wanted to go vegan, I would suggest that you use pea milk. You know those little green peas, they can actually make milk out of that. And that is one of the best milks because almond milk doesn't have a whole lot of almonds in it. I hate to be the one to burst your bubble, but if you like it, keep going. We don't do soy in our house for lots of reasons. And so we're just using dairy, and we tend to use whole milk. We tend to use whole dairy when we're using dairy. So now I think you can barely see it, but you can kind of see. It just looks like milky water, right? So that's good. And now we're ready to add back in our vegetables. So we've got, you can see the juices of the mushrooms. So we've got that 20 ounces of mushrooms all together. The recipe calls for a cup of mushrooms. So I'm not completely following the recipe. We just love mushrooms, and so I went really forward on the mushrooms. But if you go to Longwood Gardens, their mushroom soup has a lot of big chunky mushrooms too. So I got a little carried away. That's okay, I feel fine with that. But it looks good and chunky. I'm gonna bring this to a boil. And then the recipe actually calls, like I said, for truffle oil. I don't have any, but I think we're gonna be okay because it looks really good. I'm gonna bring this up to a boil. I'm going to take the stems of the tarragon and the thyme out. I'm gonna taste it to see if it needs any more salt and pepper. The only thing I have salted were the mushrooms and peppered the mushrooms. So we're gonna let this come up to a boil. It'll start to thicken because of the roux and because of the butter and flour, and that should be it. You can eat it now, you could eat it later. I will probably let it just kind of low boil on the stove for probably 2 hours, and then we'll have dinner. I've got some really yummy good sourdough bread. Peyton has some pumpernickel in the freezer, and we'll take that out and put that in the toaster, and that will be dinner. I'll check with him and see if he wants me to grill up a couple of pieces of chicken if he's feeling like he wants some meat. But I think I'm just having mushroom soup for dinner. What are you having for dinner, and how do you feel about the mushroom? Do you have a favorite soup? I love soup. Okay, I will give you a screenshot of what it looks like when it's done, but friends, it smells pretty good. I think you're gonna like this. Love from New Jersey.